would like you to hear from our council members. We have Kenny Cowan from Palos Verdes Estates, and we have Eric Alegria from Rancho Palos Verdes. And that way they can tell you what's happening in their city. We were going to give them a few minutes to talk and ask you some questions, and we can take advantage of your time with us. Is that okay? Okay, so why don't we start? Kenny, are you with us here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Why don't we start with you and my, I had thought you might want to respond to what the congressman has talked about and maybe even talk about any COVID cases in your
Sure. So I first want to thank the congressman for all the great work that he's done on the HEROES Act. I know that when he met with the Peninsula Chambers of Commerce a while back, he was talking about the urgent need for local funding at the state and local levels. And so I'm glad that the House has seen the light as far as that goes. I hope the same thing for the Senate when it comes down to it. But I really want to applaud and commend Congressman Lieu and your staff for working so hard on that one element of the HEROES Act. So thank you so much. As far as COVID cases on the peninsula, there are a total of, I think, 134 or so. 42 of those are in Palos Verdes Estates. That puts us slightly below parity with Los Angeles County. We as a city have been, as of 2 weeks ago, administering tests through our CARES program. What we'll do is we'll go to PVE seniors who are symptomatic, and we'll go to their house. We'll deliver a test that is self-administering, and we'll actually forward those tests to the labs themselves. And we've also been making calls on a regular basis to 500 registered PVE CARES seniors, as well as 1,400 or so non-registered seniors. We continue to encourage social distancing, stay 6 feet apart, wear your mask whenever you're out. I view it as something like social adjusting, because I think until and unless some effective vaccine is developed, it's going to be the new normal for a while. I read somewhere recently that if just 80% wear masks, we can actually cut the spread of the virus to 1/12 what it would have been if nobody were wearing masks. So I think masks are a key element to containing the spread of the contagion. As far as reopening, we are following LA County Department of Health orders and guidelines. I think all cities are. With all the different orders, guidelines, and provisions out there at the federal, state, and local levels, really it's the most restrictive one that applies. There's been a lot of coordination among the cities, both on the peninsula and in the South Bay beach areas, coordination among the city managers, coordination among the mayors. Our guiding principle, or our goal, is to give as many freedoms as possible with only as many restrictions as necessary. And in this past week, with LA County orders easing a bit and facilitating reopening, City of Palos Verdes Estates also opened its bluffs and its trails. We have 4 concessions in our city. All but the beach club are now open with certain restrictions. They've all developed very creative social distancing protocols. Golf is not quite the same, nor will tennis be. There's a lot of interesting things that those club managers have put in place so that residents and guests can come and play a little bit and get some fresh air. Tomorrow, we are actually opening our city hall with, again, social protocols and social distancing protocols in place. And it's important as our communities do start to reopen that we have those protocols in place. Finances is something that, of course, has impacted every city, state, county out there. And there is no government entity that is going by unscathed by it. I think for most cities, the adage of you don't know what is gone, what you got till it's gone probably applies. But Palos Verdes Estates is a little unique in this respect, and I think the adage of "you can't miss what you never had" is probably the more appropriate statement. And that's because our main revenue sources are actually property taxes and parcel taxes. We have very little commercial sales tax, only to the tune of about $300,000 a year, representing a very small percentage of our revenues. We have no TOT or hotel tax to speak of. So we're actually projecting about a 1.5 million surplus in this fiscal year. And that's due to, while we have lower revenues, we have even lower expenses than projected. And we've also had a significant amount of attrition. But again, we are not going by unscathed by any means. We do forecast a similarly sized deficit in fiscal year 20 and 21. I think CalPERS is going to affect everyone. They're expecting a 1% investment return this fiscal year. That's compared with their anticipated or projected aspirational, whatever adjective you want to place on it, rate of return of 7%, which is otherwise known as their discount rate. So 1% versus 7%, that's going to affect everybody's CalPERS accounts and their long-term UAL obligations. As far as on the federal front, again, want to commend the congressman. I know that with the CARES Act, there was $1.8 billion that was given to LA County and to LA City. Specifically, LA County got $1 billion of that, and LA City got $800 million. The cities did not get to share in any of that at all. So I guess my first question to the congressman would be, and I think that the response through the HEROES Act is very much appreciated, but the cities, all 80 other, they call them, I think, the other 87 cities in Los Angeles County, other than Los Angeles City itself, they co-signed a letter to supervisors of the LA County and at the state level, basically asking if they would be willing to share in that $1.8 million pot. Now, I don't really see that happening, to be honest, but I think they're, in doing so, we were trying to send a message that local cities need those funds as well, to a very large extent. So I'm happy to hear the congressman break down, the HEROES Act as far as state and local funding. If I heard you correctly, Congressman, you said $500 billion would be for the states, $375 billion would go to cities, and $95 billion would go to school districts.
I think he was saying million.
Well, I think that's part of the $1 trillion package. I think the millions was for Redondo Beach as an example, if I'm not mistaken. But anyhow, so I just want to leave it there. Again, thank the congressman and his staff for all his efforts in representing local interests.
Thank you.
Do you want to respond, Congressman?
So in terms of funding, first of all, thank you for your public service. And in terms of funding, the CARES Act gave $340 billion to states and local cities. And the way it was distributed is the states would give it to the local cities. However, if you were a city or county that had a size of over 500,000 people, you could directly access the federal funding without having to get state approval. So Congressman Joe Neguse and I introduced legislation saying that's sort of stupid. Why do we have that line there? We should have all local cities be able to directly access the federal funding without having to get approval from the state. So this existing HEROES Act basically allows all cities to directly access the federal funding. In the meantime, if your city is requesting funding from the state, let me or my office know. We're happy to write a letter to the governor's office and to lobby the governor's office on your behalf, as well as to LA County also.
Thank you, Congressman. As far as that $340 billion originally under the first CARES, are we still eligible for that? Can we still get that even if we have to go through the county and the state? And I know that you put out a bill trying to get a more direct route to those funds, to those federal funds. But is that still in play as far as local access to that 340 billion, or would that somehow be superseded by what's being requested in HEROES?
That would not have been superseded. And so if your city can say for X, Y, and Z reasons, we're like this amount of funding to do this and that, go ahead and request it, and then let us know, and then we will lobby on your behalf.
Great.
Okay, I would like to, just for the sake of time, Kenny, I wanted just to move over to Eric and give him a chance to talk, and we can always get back to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful to see all of you, and Congressman, thank you for joining us today as well. I had just one question, which I'll touch on at the end. I'll give a brief update, and Ken did a nice job of summarizing a lot of the activities at the peninsula level, so I'll try not to be redundant, but I will give an RPB specific update just briefly. So within some of the numbers that you heard Councilmember Cal provide, at least within the city of Rancho Palos Verdes, we've had 76 positive cases of coronavirus and 10 deaths up to this point, at least effective as of the end of last week. We declared a state of local emergency shortly after state and county directives came out, and have continued to be in that since that time, since mid-March up until this point. In recent weeks, we've been reevaluating our opportunities, dialogue with particularly Supervisor Hahn, Mayor Cruikshank, and myself in RPV have been in regular dialogue with her. And in fact, RPV was, to my knowledge, one of the only cities that created a proactive reopening plan with 3 elements, which were open space with Supervisor Hahn at this time. As we all know, things have changed and are changing, continue to change rapidly. And so in this last week, we had an opportunity to responsibly reopen all of our open space, with the exception of just a few trails throughout the city. So as we all know, the city of Rancho Palos Verdes contains many of the parks that the Peninsula residents enjoy, and of course the preserve. So we had to be very thoughtful in that approach and make sure that we were reopening in coordination and in concert with the other beach cities and the other South Bay cities. And so we feel that we've done that. Now we've gone through our first weekend. I'm getting reports that thus far things are going well. People are being very responsible, and we hope to see a continued success around that. So some of the measures that we took in the city to try to help out our community, in addition to the CARES Act, which I'm glad we've spent some time on, we in the city have tried to do our little part to help out our small business community by approving and deploying a small business financial assistance plan. It had one-time refund of business license tax, use of some community block grant funds to provide those to eligible businesses, just to do our part to kind of bridge many of the small businesses within our community, of which in RPB, brick and mortar, we have just about 200 businesses, believe it or not. And we continue to support the business community by way of the Great Takeout. So hopefully you guys have heard of the Great Peninsula Takeout. It's the idea that we're using our restaurants Tuesdays and Thursdays and getting delivery, and also we're trying to continue to provide a lot of coordination and care for our seniors. And my hat's off to Linda Reed, who deserves a lot of accolades for helping coordinate support of many of the students who are not no longer in school, to participate actively in helping do errands and make runs for some of our seniors. And so that's been very successful. I know I've talked to several seniors who've taken advantage of that particular program. So there's lots going on internally within the community to support itself as we continue to go through the pandemic. I'll give a final mention to Alert South Bay. So for those of you who like to get regular updates on what's happening, not just in the city of RPV, but also throughout the South Bay, and I can send this information out, but if you text to 888-777 the message Alert SB, you'll get a link and you can sign up by virtue of that avenue to Alert South Bay, and that will essentially give you access to regular updates from all of the communities within the South Bay. So I certainly encourage many of you, if you haven't done that, to do so. Finally, I'll touch on, I think I saw former Mayor Long shoot out a question earlier, so I'll try to respond to that now, which is, what's been the financial impact? We're actually just in the midst in RPV of going through our budget cycle right now, as well as looking at our capital projects for the upcoming year. And although we feel very good about the way we've responsibly managed our finances in the city for some time, and we're going to end the city still with surplus, we are projecting into the new year. And as you can imagine, transit occupancy tax, namely to the Terranea Resort, the city of RPV receives just below $6 million, at least within the last several years from Terranea. And we're projecting a loss of that anticipated budget of about $2.5 to $3 million in the new year. So as we go through our capital budget planning, we are really scrutinizing to make sure that we're thoughtful and prioritizing the right infrastructure projects for the city in the new year. But we're trying to remain flexible, remaining optimistic that in the coming months things loosen and improve and stabilize, which would give us an opportunity to push some of the projects that we'd like to see happen earlier than next year or the years after. But we're really focused on safety-related infrastructure projects within the city at this particular time. But we remain, so at this point we are reopened. Our city facilities and our city hall are actually going to be reopening starting tomorrow. And with responsible coordination with our residents and new plexiglass and face masks and social distancing, all of those efforts will certainly continue. But we're taking steps to begin reopening our services to our city residents. And related to that, our city council on Tuesday night will take our first step in that direction as well. We've been virtual for the last several weeks, of course, and we'll have a hybrid meeting where we're going to have just a couple of our council members present, myself included, and we're going to keep our social distance and have a meeting and take steps to try to make sure that we're accessible to our residents. So those are some of the updates. This has been an big impact on certainly all cities, as I know Ken mentioned. And although we have a healthy reserve and we are not planning to tap into that reserve at this time, we're going to have to continue to remain very, very diligent in the coming weeks, months, and years. So with all that said, Congressman, I'll just touch on a passion topic of mine. Ken asked a wonderful question about support to the cities, which he responded to, so thank you. My concern, I happen to be a healthcare professional, work for Providence, and so I've seen all the coordination that's going around this pandemic. And then I'm also a small business owner, and so I'm very sympathetic to, I believe I've seen numbers around 20 to 25% within the county of those who are currently unemployed. So if you could, just what are your thoughts, short and long term, on where the federal government or where legislative action may be able to benefit those who we know now and in the future are significantly economically impacted and may continue to be without a job for a period of time? Thank you.
Thank you also for your public service. And let me again say that what Congress does is we provide resources. It's really the cities and the counties and the states are executing on the front lines. So thank you for doing that. In answer to your question, my view is that this virus is not going away anytime soon. The president a couple weeks ago said that this virus is just going to leave. There is no evidence of that. What the evidence shows is that every day we're still getting, upwards of over 20,000 new cases in the United States. And so the virus is continuing to spread, which means that economic activity is still going to be slow because people are not going to engage in a lot of the normal activities they otherwise would have, such as going to eat out or going to watch movies or shopping or going on a cruise ship and so on. And so you're going to have various industry sectors that are going to be very hard hit by this virus until there's a vaccine or a drug therapy. My view is we have to continue to provide unemployment insurance so that this HEROES Act extends the federal unemployment insurance portion all the way to next January. I think we also have to provide additional stimulus checks directly to American families. And I think you're going to see in a few months when this virus, in fact, doesn't go away, that this economy is not going to be normal. Like all other worldwide economies, it's going to be slowed by this virus. And as a result, government is going to be one of the few institutions standing that can provide sustenance and resources to millions and millions of Americans and businesses. And that's why we passed the HEROES Act. I think the Republicans will figure out sooner, hopefully rather than later, that they're going to have to pass this as well, because we're just not going to be able to get back to normal levels of economic activity because people are protecting themselves and their loved ones. People are going to naturally social distance. Most rational people are going to do that. And that's just going to have an effect on our economic activity over the course of this year.
Thank you, Congressman. Before we get back to Kenny and Eric, I do think Connie Sullivan wanted to ask a question before you go.
Oh, I did. Thank you. I didn't think there was going to be time. Congressman, one thing I really like about you is that you're always very positive and upbeat. And I don't know if you remember this, but I ran into you election night, November 2016, outside of Janice Hahn's victory party. And by that time, we knew that Donald Trump was going to be president. And I asked you to please say something hopeful. And you said, our institutions are strong. And I'm wondering if you can say that with such confidence today.
Oh, thank you, Connie, for that question. So I think most of our institutions have still remained relatively good. Our judiciary has been generally pretty good. A lot of judges have ruled against some crazy ideas by the Trump administration. I am disappointed by Attorney General Bill Barr with the Justice Department. I think he's taken some actions that have damaged their credibility. But a lot of our other agencies, institutions are still doing the everyday work of government, regardless of who the president happens to be. In terms of what our institutions would be like if Donald Trump wins in November, I don't know if they can sustain another 4 years of this kind of chaos. But again, we had in our country a Republican investigation. It was this Mueller investigation was started by Republican Rod Rosenstein, who appointed Robert Mueller, who was a Republican, who then did this investigation, of which the first 2 years were in a Republican-controlled House, Senate. And this investigation was allowed to go to its completion. So that's still pretty remarkable. Not a lot of countries, I think, would have allowed that. Now, I'm disappointed that the Republican-controlled Senate did not convict the president, but he was impeached. He's the first Republican president in history to be impeached. And we're going to go into November with the voters now having their ability to decide whether they want to fire him or not. And most of our institutions are still standing and still doing the day-to-day work of the American people. So I think we can survive another 5-6 months. I'm not sure if we could another 4 years on top of that. So hopefully Vice President Biden wins in November.
Okay, did you have a follow-up, Connie, or can I move on?
No, thank you.
Thank you. You know, I should recognize Steve. I see your face. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about Rolling Hills Estates or.
No, not really. Thank you very much for the question. I do thank Ted for being here. It's been really informative, both him and the questions that others have asked. I would like to let anyone listening know that we also will be opening our offices tomorrow on a fairly limited basis. We would prefer that people make phone calls and appointments before they come in. And beyond that, we are continuing to follow county guidelines.
Okay.
That's about it.
Okay, good. I saw you on, and we got 3 cities from the peninsula on, so I just wanted to recognize you. Okay, Congressman Lieu, are you leaving us, or can you continue with questions?
I need to get going, but let me leave you with some hopeful stuff. So one of the reasons that we're in this lockdown is to help flatten the curve so that we don't overwhelm hospitals. We have largely accomplished that thanks to amazing compliance by the overwhelming majority of the American people. Now what we're trying to do is to reopen America safely. At the same time, these lockdowns do buy us time. And what time allows is for our scientists and researchers and the best and brightest in the world to try to come up with drug therapies and vaccines to cure this virus. So we know that some trials of the drug remdesivir has shown to reduce the amount of time a person spends in a hospital. So that's positive. We've had reports out of Hong Kong of a 3-drug cocktail of antiviral medication that appears to also have had some good efficacious effects against this virus. I was on a conference call a few days ago with Patrick Soon-Shiong, who has done a lot of things in biotech, and they're working on some drug therapies and a vaccine that seem pretty promising. And so you have a lot of people all over the world and in the United States working on this, and with every passing week, we get additional information on research and data, and we get closer to finding a cure. So that's why we're asking people to shelter in place and to not go out if they don't have to. And that's why we want to reopen slowly. And we don't want someone, right, to die unnecessarily, especially if they could have stayed alive had they gotten coronavirus 6 months later than they've got it now because a drug therapy came out. So we're just fighting for time right now, and time is on our side because, again, with the passage of time, we get additional breakthroughs in drug therapies and potential cures for this virus. So I'm hopeful as we go forward that what we're doing is working, and we're going to get a drug therapy or a cure sooner rather than later. So with that, thanks for having me, and thank you for all that you do, and stay safe.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to continue now with our 2 speakers, Kenny and Eric. If you have anything more to add, or we can continue with our agenda. So either.
I just had one thing, because I saw it as a question on the chat. Someone had asked, let's see, I think I have to scroll up. There's a lot of people posting on chat. Someone was asking, I think, whether our Palos Verdes Estates Police Department is issuing citations for not wearing masks.
Right.
That's a very good question. I mean, it's a very interesting one. On Friday, the county Health Department Director, Barbara Ferrer, had a conference call. I was on that call. My understanding is that we are using at this point, we're using an encouragement mode to try to get people to wear protective masks when they're out in public, particularly, and to some extent, primarily, if they are going to come across others that are not within the same household. So to be able to actually issue a citation, I believe that there has to be a law on which to base that citation. So to my knowledge, there is no law out there currently at the state level, at the county or local level, that will permit a citation to be written because someone is not wearing a mask. So at this point, I guess the easiest way to explain is that it's strong guidance and encouragement at this point that the LA County Department was Health Department was trying to convey. And that's what I believe our officers are doing, but I'm happy to double check with our police chief to see exactly what the protocols are as far as whenever they see people who are not wearing masks. But Director Ferrer was basically saying, if you leave the house, take a mask with you. And if you're going to be around, or when you are around others that are not in your household, put it on. If you're the only one walking on the road or on the bluffs, you don't need to have it on, but just have it on you somewhere in your pocket. And if you come across others, again, that are not within your household, at that time you want to put it on. And again, you hear different reports about what the purpose of wearing masks is. I think it goes both ways. You want to wear the mask not only so that you transmit droplets to other people, but it's also so that you don't inhale droplets. There are different types of facial coverings. It doesn't have to be N95 rated. It could just be cloth coverings for your face. But I believe it's a courtesy to others that are around you, and I believe it's for self-protection as well. So that was a terrific question, and I intend to follow up with the chief with that. Thanks for asking it.
Okay.
And this is Eric. I guess I too would just like to make a comment, a hopeful comment, just to say it's nice to see both Ken and Steve here, and I know they, along with all of our colleagues on the peninsula, are working really hard. And so in any challenging situation, this one in particular, I suppose the silver lining is that you see really the best in humanity come out. And as I mentioned, being a healthcare professional, I've gotten a chance to see the physicians, the nurses, and even professions that we typically don't think of. Those people who are grocers and are continuing to provide us food and care for us. So seeing people knowing the risk with fear being a very big factor, continuing to get up every day and contribute and come together as a community is really neat to see. And I'm particularly proud of really our 4 cities in the peninsula and our school district and the way we've been collaborating together. So I just want to put that message out there for our club and really voice a sense of pride, and hopefully you all are aware, and when you see those folks you can say thank you as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. One thing that I've noticed is with the COVID is that all the medical stuff that we used to do for preventive care, we can't do.
Right.
And I'm hoping that will come back because there's other things that people get sick with. And if we don't continue the preventive care, we're going to see other things happening.
Right. And if I'll just respond to that briefly. In my work with Providence, I manage all the contracted doctors that Providence works with in Southern California. And I could say the answer is yes. There's definitely a huge awareness in the healthcare system that there's this backlog of patients with the chronic conditions and that need care, and there's a ramp up to get back to a place where all those people are getting their needs met. So at least in my sort of one healthcare system that I deal with day to day, I've seen that. So I feel encouraged by that, and I feel comfortable relaying that.
Great. Okay, I see a question for Kenny on the chat. Do you see that, Kenny, or you want me to ask it?
Oh, is that what the
question about public and private tennis courts? Are they open? If so, are there guidelines for singles versus doubles? Are people allowed to play basketball, paddleball, tennis at the middle school and high school?
Yeah, another great question. And it's interesting it's coming from Rob Wynn, because Rob beats me regularly whenever we get out there and play tennis. So I think he's just looking forward to another beatdown of me.
No, just a friendly game, Kenny.
But it's a great question. And, you know, to be honest, it's a little bit of a patchwork of different opinions out there among the various cities. The county, the health orders itself and the amendments do not call out tennis specifically, but they do have FAQ sections and guidelines, and tennis is actually called out as not being permitted at this time. This is as recent as this last week. Notwithstanding that, different cities are opening up their tennis facilities. I know that 2 weeks ago, Manhattan Beach decided at a council level to open up their public tennis facilities. This last Tuesday, our city decided to allow our Palos Verdes Tennis Club concession to open up. Again, it's very limited, very restricted, with social protocols in place. No doubles, no large group lessons. USTA events are still being held. So no, there have not been USTA events that have been allowed. I know this because my kids play tennis. The USTA has put out guidelines for if and when you are able to play tennis, how to do so. And again, we talk about different creative ways that these clubs and leagues can change their operational procedures to allow for safe play. But it's very limited at this point. So the clubs that I know that are open, both public and private, are encouraging singles only. So I know that'll help with us, Rob, you and me. No doubles. Basketball is still not on the table. There has been no guidance at the county level allowing for contact sports at that level. Paddleball and tennis. So, the school district is an interesting one. I've been meaning to talk to some of the school board members, because I know that as far as Penn High and Peninsula High and PV High, they actually had locked up their tennis courts since, school closed on March 13th. I don't believe those are open just yet. So as far as the school facilities go, I believe that those are still closed. But Rob, if you and I try hard enough, I think we can find a court to play at so you can continue your dominance.
Okay, so let's, we have one, I think, final question here from Connie, and then we'll move on.
Okay, hi. So last time we heard from Councilman Zuckerman, who's also on this call, about the Clean Power Alliance and how his city is the only one on the peninsula that is involved in the Clean Power Alliance. So this is both for Kenny and for Eric, council members Coe and Alegria. Do you know what it is? Do you know what that was from Kenny? Or that was Eric? That was Eric, okay. And what can we do to encourage your city to join?
Ken, if I may, I'll kick off on that question.
Please. Go ahead.
So Connie, I'm glad you asked that question. I'm passionate about this topic. I talked to Christian Horvath in Redondo. Redondo is one of the cities that is in the Clean Power Alliance, and was able to get this item on our council agenda a couple of months back, and it's coming back to us again. So I could use your support, and those of you in the club, to communicate to our council the importance of Clean Power Alliance. There was a lot of robust discussion. To be frank, I think although I work really well with our council and find that we're able to get a lot done collectively, this is one topic I think I'm gonna need a little bit of support with from our community to express the benefits of having better clean energy options. And I certainly see them and would encourage and welcome emails to our council and And I'll continue to lobby my colleagues as well, because I'd like to see, as this comes back, this be something that we can proceed with in our city.
Great. That sounds like an action item for us. What about Councilman Coe?
I'll be frank, Connie, I don't know a whole lot about that initiative, but I've only heard about it kind of around the edges. But I think it would be wonderful if you or anybody from that alliance would like to come and give a presentation to council on it. I know that we have a very receptive council in terms of wanting clean air and environmental initiatives. I'll actually call out to my fellow council member Davidson. He is one person in particular among the council members who has always been concerned about public health, and so I think it would be very helpful if someone from the alliance or you could come and give some sort of a presentation.
When this did come up a few years ago, a lot of those folks that are very concerned about the city's finances, and I remember specifically Des Myers writing about it in a very negative way, and that seemed to sway the council at that time, and I hope we can overcome that this time.
Okay. I think we would very much welcome some sort of presentation and more information for certain.
Okay, great. That's an action on us to do that. So we will do that.
And I think Steve wanted
one
to.
last thing.
And I think Steve wanted to say
so
something.
I saw that. So let's just do with Steve Zuckerman about the clean pipelines, and then we'll move on with our agenda.
Kenny, I'm encouraged to hear your open-mindedness on it, and Eric, both. I think the message that, two things really, when you're talking to people that you may want to emphasize is Rolling Estates has had an unbelievable positive experience with it. And when I say that, I mean the residents of Rolling Hills Estates. Only 8% of the people in the program have opted out or chosen to return to Southern Cal Edison. And that's huge. I mean, that's really the best proof there is that this is a good program, beyond the fact that we're making huge carbon savings. The other thing is that some people don't like, and this is the way it'll be phrased, government making decisions for them, because the city itself has to opt in. But the fact of the matter is, once the city has opted in, and this is really the punchline, you will be providing your residents with a far greater range of choices that they don't have right now. Right now, if they want to burn electricity, they burn bundled SCE power, and that's it. If your city is a member of the CPA, they have three choices, one of them less expensive than SCE power and still cleaner, or they can choose to go back to SCE. So what you're really doing is providing a wider range of choices and huge net benefit in terms of carbon savings from your city. Our city is 100%, and that's why it's amazing that only 8% of the people have opted down, because at 100%, it is about 7% more expensive than standard SCE power. Now, keep in mind that the cost of power is only about half of your power bill. So that's an incremental increase of about 3% for people, and they've accepted that and are really happy with it, because functionally, Rolling Hills Estates now has a carbon profile that's essentially net zero carbon. It is as if every house in our city had solar panels, and that's big. And I think you realize you will never, as a council, have as significant a chance to affect environmental outcomes as you will by joining the CPA. That's it.
Okay. Kenny, Eric, would you want a presentation at your council meetings on this, or?
For RPV, I did have a presentation. I had Clean Power Alliance come out. I think this was January or February. We had a robust discussion, and it was staff was asked to do an analysis and come back to see what the impact the impact would be to our city. The way I'm presenting it is it's choice, and I think a lot of people can agree, even if they disagree on a lot of things, that when you're giving consumers choice, and if it's kind of a net neutral proposition and you're benefiting the environment in such a significant way, it's positive all the way around. So we're well aware and underway. So I don't need an additional presentation, but again, I got the impression that my council was a little reluctant. So more than anything, just a call to action, as I said, from all of you to put the note out there.
So you want an email campaign?
Yes.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, all right, we'll have to work on that.
From RPV residents.
Yeah, okay, and I would guess, is that the same for you, Kenny, or?
As for PVE, now that we're talking about it a little bit more, I'm actually starting to recall a little bit more of, I think, from when it was under discussion a few years ago. Now, this is just a question. Does it need to reach a certain critical mass, or enough residents actually want to do it in order for it to make sense, as far as incorporating that or having that as an option as a utility, or does it have to reach a certain threshold in order for it to happen? So that's my question. But as far as information and a presentation to council, I think that this council would very much appreciate knowing more about this. We do
So let us work with Steve. Can we do that? I don't want to continue this, but Steve will work with you and get a presentation to PVE. Is that okay, Steve?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we have a new city manager that is right. Starting in June. So I think it would be best to wait until she comes on board first.
I agree. Well, I'm sure we're not going to.
Okay, and just one, because I can answer that question really, really fast. And it takes 3 people to become a member of the CPA, meaning a majority of the city council. Then the people vote by virtue of their individual choices. So it's very easy to do, and it maximizes individual autonomy and choice.
Right, but but in that Kenny is not up to date on that. I think we do need to represent
right.
it. So we'll work on that in June or July, and I know you have other things on your plate, but we'll work with Steve.
And Kenny, I'd be happy if you'd like. I mean, it's up to you whether it would be a good thing or a bad thing, but I'd certainly be happy to come to that council meeting and answer questions with respect to the program.
I think that would be great, and you can do so sitting where you are right now, too.
Okay. Thanks, Kenny.
All right, that sounds great. Great handshake there. Thanks, guys, and I really appreciate the cities working together here.